Hi, welcome to Give Me the Bible, where God's Word speaks for itself. In the last couple of videos, we've talked about our need to avoid sin at all costs, to do whatever we can to not sin, because sin hurts God. It not only breaks God's law, it also breaks God's heart. And so we want to just really try to steer clear of sin altogether, not try to get as close as we can to it without actually sinning, but no, just go in the opposite direction, stay away from it. But in order to do that, we really need to kind of go backwards a little bit in the process of sin, because usually you don't just wake up and fall into sin and it's just totally random and you just, oh, well, I just sinned and I didn't realize it. Sometimes, yes, it's true, we can stumble into sin and say something that we shouldn't have, just kind of blurt out, some curse word or something like that, or find ourselves in the middle of sin that we really weren't planning on. But most of the time, that's not how it works. Most of the time, sin begins with temptation. And so we want to talk in this video about what temptation really is. Temptation is basically a desire to do something. That's really kind of a simplistic way of looking at it, and the truth is we can be tempted to do things that aren't evil. Like, for instance, I could say, it's very tempting for me to eat that piece of chocolate cake. Okay, well, it wouldn't be a sin for me to eat that cake, but it's tempting because I really want it. I'm desiring that. Well, when we talk about temptation in the context of the Bible, we're talking about a temptation to do evil, a desire to do wrong things. Okay, that sometimes we just want to do wrong things. We want to do sinful things, even though we know God has said that it's wrong. And temptation is usually the starting point for sin. Look in the book of James, in James chapter 1. Notice kind of the process that he describes here about temptation and sin. He says in James chapter 1, verse 13, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death." There he says that the reason we fall into temptation is because we have these desires, these lusts for things that are evil. And when we actually give in to those lusts and those desires, that's when we sin. And that's when death is born basically out of our sin, because the penalty for sin is death. Okay, that's what the wages of sin are, Romans 6, verse 23. I found a really helpful illustration, or let me say it this way, a helpful definition of what temptation is, because it adds another element to it. Temptation is desire plus opportunity. Desire, and let's just call it what it is in terms of the Bible, evil desire. Evil desire plus opportunity to carry out that evil desire equals temptation. And I think that equation is very helpful, because it shows us that those two things are necessary in order to have temptation. You have to have the evil desire, and you also have the opportunity to carry it out. You have to have both of those, and if you don't have the desire, you aren't going to be tempted. And if you don't have the opportunity to carry out the desire, really the temptation is going to be greatly lessened, because you're not really going to have any sort of outlet. And so what we want to talk about in the next two videos is those specific things. If we want to properly deal with temptation in our lives as Christians, we need to address, first of all, our desires. And second of all, we need to address the way that we limit our opportunities to carry out those evil desires. And that's what we'll talk about in the following videos, and I sure hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for your support and your encouragement and your interest in spiritual things, and Lord willing, I'll see you next time.